Hi, hello everyone, and a very good evening here from Singapore. And we share the same time zone with Malaysia. Alena and I, we are in the same time zone, and of course, friends from Myanmar and Australia. So before that, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much to ArtsEquator for organizing this very important conversation. And just to introduce myself, my name is Amin Farid. I'm a practitioner, researcher of the Malay arts here in Singapore and the region, and also the joint artistic director of Bumi Collective. And with me today, allow me to introduce our three panelists who, are very eager to share about their perspective on this topic. Firstly, we have Mr. Tui. He's a puppeteer from Myanmar and is the founder of Tui U Myanmar Traditional Puppet Theatre. And he is doing puppetry both for tourism entertainment and education for the younger practitioners. Next, we have Alena Murang. She is a sape musician from Sarawak, Malaysia. And the sape is a lute instrument of the Orang Ulu people of Borneo. She works on music and video production with careful thought in honoring cultural heritage in the context of contemporary times. And last but certainly not the least, we have Jacob Boehme. He's a Melbourne born and raised artist of the Narangga and Kaurna Nations, South Australia. He is a multidisciplinary theatre maker and choreographer, creating work for stage, screen, large-scale public events, and festivals. So yes, we are all gathered here today to have this conversation, as what Nabila have said about the traditional art, the forgotten COVID casualty. I think just a preamble. We are talking specifically about the COVID circumstance and how this is affecting traditional artists. We have seen a lot of support or non-support coming from different sectors, and this is something worthy for us to have a conversation today. So probably to kickstart this conversation, I will like to ask this very simple question to three of my fellow colleagues here. And it's a question that is specifically about the current times. How has COVID-19 specifically affected our practice and livelihoods as artists? And how has it affected traditional arts communities in general? So maybe to start this conversation going, and we also encourage interdisciplinary, cross-national perspectives as well. Probably I would like to invite Jacob first to have that to start off this conversation. So how has the COVID-19 affected traditional artists or yourself as an artist?
Yes, good evening. Thank you everyone for having me here. So I come from the Narangga Ghana Nations. I work both in contemporary and traditional arts. For us here in Australia, Aboriginal communities, particularly regional and remote area communities that are practicing traditional arts and craft, really a lot of what has happened to Aboriginal communities since COVID has kicked in is practice has ceased because the government has forcibly locked down remote area Aboriginal communities, originally against their will. But so I'm doing a project with my own family who are in a remote area in South Australia. So I've been calling my uncles and my aunts for the last almost 4 months, 5 months. When COVID first happened, the government had locked down the community, but nobody had planned or thought through how they were going to get essential services like food into those communities. So practice or creative practice, even practicing traditional arts and culture, has been the last thing on people's minds. Things like caring for elders, not starving, they've been the most pressing issues.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Jacob. And probably, Alena, your perspective on this current times as well.
So for me, how the lockdown affected my practice was primarily through a lot of shows being cancelled. But I mean, that goes for any musician really around the world. And I think it's really affected traditional practitioners in the rural areas. I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, so for me, connection wasn't too bad. Well, connection was good actually, but then there's a lot of artists that live in the rural areas, some very rural, some not even that rural, who number one didn't have a great access to the internet, and number two, if they did, sometimes they don't know how to use it to, you know, in this time to do online shows and stuff like that. And as well for me, I don't know when I can next go back to the kampong or to the village to do my documentation, to do my research with the elders. And, you know, even just in the short time of lockdown, I think like 2 months, we've had like 3 elders leave us already. So for me, the documentation part is very urgent, and I don't know when I can go back because, you know, even if I'm allowed to travel, I'm not sure if I should in case you know, I'm a carrier. Yeah.
Thank you, Alena. And Mr. Tui, do you your perspectives, please?
Ningalaba, greeting from Myanmar. I am Mr. Tui or Driver Tui. Not director, not founder of the puppet theater, because now I am doing delivery job. Today I came back early for this meeting. So we are relying 100% for tourism. So before COVID-19, my living room, my house is full of visitors. So our incomes cover expand on my children, also my kitchen. But when the COVID starts, the tourism totally stop, or let's say zero. So there was no visitor. So I have to change my daily earning to get. So because of my Facebook friends, they are doing online shopping, and then they get me job. Then we deliver things around the city. So this is what in Myanmar and what puppeteer now doing in Myanmar.
I think what we can hear from you know, just this brief exchange so far is, you know, the idea of, you know, traditional arts communities in rural communities that have yet to receive attention, or at least proper support. So maybe I would like to also ask if, you know, if any of you can share whether there are any top-down assistance or programs that are coming from the government, or, you know, coming from agencies to help these communities. If anybody would like to respond.
Yeah, so there's been one initiative here in Australia, the Australia Council for the Arts, which is our major federal arts funding body, had done an emergency reshuffle of public monies, of funding grants, to get emergency grants out to a whole bunch of artists. Initially, it was going to contemporary arts only, but recently the Australia Council had just created a fund called Cherish. Now, under Cherish, one of those branches, one of the things that you could apply for was something called the Living Libraries. So, Alena, this would have applied to you completely, like really about your practice, because under Living Libraries, it was all about giving people funding to go and document elders' knowledge. Because one thing that we've all recognized with this virus is that it has attacked our elders. So at least the Australia Council had a small grant, a small funding opportunity that realised the importance of elders' knowledge. So you could apply for funding to go and archive and document.
So that's the Cherish Fund.
That's so beautiful. I wish we had that here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Alena, probably you can share a little bit about, you know, whether there are such programs.
There are programs to support the arts here, largely from Chandana. not specifically for traditional arts. It would be for music or for visual arts, for example. And there's also a new program from the Ministry of Communications and Culture. If I'm not mistaken, it's more focused on digital support. Yeah, so nothing really specifically for traditional arts. There are opportunities. Yeah.
No, I think that's quite true too. Because sometimes when we think of the arts as a monolith, we assume that all the money that goes to the arts is for the arts. But at times we also forget that certain arts would require different needs and different activities to help them survive. And so this is definitely a problem, and that's why we're talking about it as a forgotten casualty, because it's not something that is specifically given. And a lot like what Jacob's saying, sometimes it's focused mostly for contemporary arts, and forgetting that some of these art forms are livelihoods, right? Are not arts in itself. It's also very much culture. And like what Jacob was also saying about elders as living heritage, to record. I think I want to ask Mr. Twe, like I look at you as an elder of your form. Are there agencies and government support you and your as your knowledge as elder?
So in Myanmar, there are association called Myanmar Theatrical Association. They support little bit, but not by government. And also there are support by to the SME by the Ministry of Tourism. But we are not like not register SME, or we are not paying tax to the governments. So we are not entitled to get the loan for SME. So something like that.
And Mr. Twe, I like what I understand, you are very dependent on tourism, right? The tourism sector. And now because there hasn't been a lot of tourists coming in, you've also shared that you had to change your career somewhat, right, into a delivery man. Has there been any talks or in helping from the tourism sector to assist in any way?
I think for tourism is still there are restrictions to travel even in Myanmar. So I have an audience who are working in Myanmar, like embassy or organization. So they like to visit to my theater. But there is a restriction by the government stay end of this month. So I cannot start again. But maybe in next month, we can start our performance again.
So Mr. Twe has shared a little bit about theatrical collectives, to assist. That means, more bottom up approach. So, Alena and Jacob, do you have any such bottom up approaches coming from artist communities or from ordinary citizens?
Actually, I just wanted to ask Mr. Twe a question.
Sure.
Mr. Twe,
Yes.
have you, during lockdown, have you done any maybe videos of your puppet theater or any videoing of the live show? Does anybody come and help you to do that so people around the world can see your puppet theater?
Actually not, because according to my experience, streaming live in Myanmar traditional puppetry is not popular, and also no audience. That is why I did not try to broadcast live or to put on YouTube as well.
Because you need the audience.
Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Because in Myanmar, the traditional arts are very declining after the 1988 political revolution. So the puppet shows or traditional performance are only a question for tourists or foreigners. that is a bigger challenge to Myanmar people. That is why sometimes before COVID, I'm trying to go to school and rural area to make puppetry education to the younger generation. But now we are restricted for traveling, so I can do as well.
I was just also like to I wonder, Mr. Twee, do you also have a younger apprentice who you specifically mentor for your traditional art?
Yes, I am very lucky man. Because, when I started my theater in 2006, last 14 years, my youngest son was only 2 years old, and my elder daughter was 9 years old. They didn't know about traditional puppetry. They only just playing with puppets. But luckily, after they growing up, they are willingly to learn. And now my son is 16 and my daughter is 23. They are puppeteer of my group. So also they are friends. They came to my house and they learned together. So I'm sharing our traditional puppetry to younger generation.
Thank you, Mr. Twee. Alena, probably the question that you were directing, you've directed to Mr. Twee. Is this something that you're also doing on your own as an artist?
Yeah, so when lockdown happened here, I was very quick to get on my Instagram live to do I call them sound baths, because it used to be used for healing and for like meditation, but it was the first time I've ever gone on Instagram live, and I found it very, very, very strange. But the reception was very good, so I did it quite often, and then Facebook lives, but just straight from my phone.
And why was it strange? Was it because you don't know?
In so many ways. You're like sitting in your living room, playing and singing to your phone, this tiny thing in front of you that's like propped up against a glass like that, and you're sitting at it interacting with the phone. It's very strange. And because I don't know if you've heard Sape music, is like very slow and very calming, and you kind of like finish the song and you're just in your living room, and people are chatting back at you. It's very strange. But yeah, I think we will probably be doing this for a while more. I got used to it.
And do you have artist communities that are helping one another, supporting one another in this period?
So in Kuala Lumpur in particular, I was very proud and impressed of all the musicians and music producers, because they were very quick to respond to lockdown, doing collaborations, online shows. So yeah, it was very, very nice to see people coming together. Even people that would usually be competitive would be working together. So that was really nice.
Wonderful, a sense of community there. And Jacob, do you like to share anything?
Yeah, one of the wonderful things that have come out of this is a new grassroots collective called the Regional Dance Alliance, which is a collective of independent artists, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists, that are working in regional and remote areas around Australia. We work with and for traditional custodians, with elders, with communities, in the preservation and maintenance of culture and cultural arts, as well as intergenerational practice, as well as contemporary First Nations creative expression. So a lot of us are working in silos, a lot of us work alone in those communities. And one of the wonderful things that has happened out of this is that a lot of us have come together to rely on each other for support, which has then turned into a new grassroots collective called the Regional Dance Alliance, which is also filling a gap in terms of advocacy, because what we have found is a lot of the voices of traditional communities have been left out of arts advocacy. Therefore, that's why you see a gap in the funding pools or the support. So the Regional Dance Alliance has not only become a support network for other artists, but it's also become an essential voice in advocacy for traditional arts.
And I'm just wondering, because Australia has a good somewhat good framework for the arts. I'm just wondering, like for friends in Myanmar, Myanmar and Malaysia, like because sometimes we are hearing that the arts is sometimes put under tourism, and that might not fully reflect or fully support the arts in what we how we would like it to be. So do you have any comments on that? Any of our friends here?
In terms of traditional arts and culture coming under a banner of tourism here in Australia, I think that's where a lot of our remote areas definitely make money, and it's definitely through small business practice and social enterprise. It's more of a business model rather than one of the publicly funded arts models that most of us have become used to since the creation of, the Australian Council for the Arts really has only been around since the 1970s. And in that time, I've been fortunate to have been brought up in an era where it's just normal for me to think that the government support arts activity. That's what I've grown up with. But what we've seen recently with a Liberal government, and I mean capital L, not small l, a Conservative government, is that the funding for arts in this country is becoming less and less and less, even more so traditional arts, because the essentially white government here have no respect. Unless it's for tourism purposes, then we can show that we have Aborigines to the rest of the world and then put them away.
Okay. And Alena, do you have anything to comment on that? Or
So Sarawak Tourism Board supports me quite a bit when it's in line with obviously their aim. So I'm very thankful for that. However, as a musician, I would just love to, be embraced as a musician under the music community rather than under tourism solely, because I think under tourism you're kind of, especially coming from Borneo, it's like really romanticized, and sometimes I just want to play a bit of rock music or something. And I think here arts and culture sits under the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, whereas music has kind of been taken over by the Ministry of Communications. So it's all kind of like patchy here and there. Chandana was formed about maybe 2-3 years ago now. So that's really helped kind of bring things together, but I think there's still a lot that needs to be done. But yeah, so I've been slowly trying to find my way into that music kind of department or arena and sit like in mainstream music as well. So then I can sit in both tourism and music, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Htwe, do you have anything to comment on that?
Yes. For the government, I would like to explain a little bit loud, because Myanmar is not like other countries in the region. We have now, let's say, democratic government, but we are the British colony about 100 years, and we got independent in 1948. From 1948 to 1962, said this is a parliament democracy government at the time. But in 1962, military seized the power and they changed socialist system. So we are under the socialist government 26 years, from 1962 to 1988. And 1988, there was a political change crisis. And 1990, we had the first election, but the party who won in the election was not handed over. And then military government took the power and they made their constitution for 17 years. 17. And in 2010, they made second election. But the government won in the election. We are from, let's say, socialist government or military government. And then 2010 to 2015, we are first democratic government again. But they are from military. Most of them are generals. So in Myanmar, puppetry is paid and approved by the government. Why, you know? This is funny, but really happened. Because the former governments, 26 years socialist governments, and 20 years military government, and 5 years first elected government. But they are the same people, just changing the uniforms. And they hate and afraid of puppetry because they are named or called puppet government or marionette government. Only one senior general behind manipulating president and minister. So we have no hope to support by the government because they hate even the word puppetry.
Okay.
So now we are a new government led by Lady Aung San Suu Kyi from 2015 to till now. Very soon there will be new election. So for this government, we hope a lot because they are not puppet government, not military government. So we hope a lot support by the government, but they are very busy. And there are many problems to solve in the country till now, especially in the western border. So government, they can even look the culture session, not only traditional performing arts. So until now, we have nothing supported by the government.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Htwe, for sharing that, historical overview of Myanmar, and also, Myanmar as a young democratic nation, and also the stigma that goes with puppetry, because, the current government or governments are considered like a marionette government. And this stigma is, I think it's also very evident in some of our cultures where, traditional arts at times are seen as outdated or just behind times. And I just want to ask also to Alena and Jacob whether now we are also seeing the fact that COVID has allowed for artists to go online, as we've heard from Alena as well, to share their work. And I think this is also very much relevant with, one of the questions that I'm actually seeing here from Chris, who's also asking, like, if all these traditional forms are going online, how do we still maintain that character of the traditional arts without losing the how it's been practiced before? So maybe is this something that you grapple with, or friends within the traditional art scene has to grapple with?
This is something that I've been doing for probably 20 or so years, is as a person who walks between two worlds. So I have a white mother and an Aboriginal father. Therefore, I have a foot in both worlds. And I also have a foot in both the contemporary arts and the traditional arts. So what I've been doing with a lot of different communities is that because I went to Western Arts University and I learned a whole bunch of skills there, but I also was brought up with I also was taught traditional dance and customs from around the country. What I normally do is that I work with youth and with elders. So we work with youth at the moment to bring them in through contemporary arts, but then through the contemporary arts practice, we feed in traditional knowledge. And it's a way of kind of disguising, because kids now would much rather be on their phone listening to Beyonce, seriously. So what we do is we bring Beyonce into the space, And then we all of a sudden bring a songman or a songwoman into the space so that they're not learning just Beyonce, but they're learning a traditional dance and a song as well. So now what we're doing is, now that online and so much access to the digital world, which in itself raises a whole lot of problems about equity and privilege, because we don't have coverage, good coverage everywhere. But what we are doing is that we're doing the same thing in terms of creating contemporary arts projects, but feeding in traditional knowledge through that. For example, the project that I'm working on at the moment, which is connecting songline, a particular songline from the south to the north of Australia. And this is a songline that follows the tracks of the dingo, the wild dog. But the wild dog is also, has its DNA comes from parts of Asia. One of those routes goes through Taiwan. So we're introducing a school, a primary school of children in Taiwan, to a primary school of children where my community is, online, but they are working with elders in their own communities, but then having to jump online and share and then work. The elders will tell them stories, and then artists will go in and work with painting, sculpture, animation, weaving, and then the kids will respond to those stories and then jump online and share them between Taiwan and Australia. So they're doing contemporary arts practice, but as a reflection of what they're learning from elders.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think Cathy just shared Jacob's project there on the chat. If anyone wants to get to know a little bit more about this wild dog project, and
I need
Alena,
to speak to you, Alena.
Yes.
Sorry, I need to speak to you, Alena, because the wild dog actually has the songline goes up in through Borneo.
Because I've been working with some with Taiwan, also indigenous in Taiwan, for the last 3 years. It's been really interesting.
And yeah, Alena,
your question, about audiences.
Audiences, and whether the traditional form has been altered.
Even the fact of having even a live audience is something that is new to our form of arts, because I don't know if it's same in your languages, but we have no word for music and no word for art in our language, because they're just functional, and you weren't like glorified as a musician. Instead, your role was to play music, and then the village role was to sing back, or the village role was to take turns dancing, and you didn't have an audience, you didn't have a stage, everything was in a circle. So even my teacher, Matthew Now, he started performing sape around the 1980s on stage, and he was one of the first people to do that. And he said it was very hard to make the music relevant to an audience. And so we've also been trying to do that. I've been playing for 19 years now. So even with going online, I think that's just another way of our practice evolving. If we look back to the past, we've always just had to evolve if we want to stay relevant. So yeah, it changes, but that's how it is. That's why I kind of sometimes struggle with the term traditional, because actually we are being contemporary, and how come a violin is not traditional or guitar is not traditional?
No, I think when the question was first also shared with me, I was wondering also about the term traditional arts. I think that's why I say not everyone would identify with the term, or would classify their practice as such. But I think there is also value in the term because of the needs of certain traditional communities that we might sideline if we just to classify them under the arts in general. I'm just curious, Alena, like for the sape, it's being a musical instrument, then we also have to consider the artisans that create the musical instruments. Do you know whether how adversely affected they are as well, or?
They've been the good thing is that they've had more time at home to create, right? So now there's more of a supply because there was quite a demand for sapets. But thing is now people don't have spending money to purchase a sapet. So even though people are interested, it's considered quite expensive. If it's your first sapet, it's 1,000 ringgit, which is how many dollars? I'm not sure.
Yeah, about 300 Sing dollars, 350 Sing dollars.
So it's
Yeah.
quite expensive, you know, in this time when nobody really has much money and it's your first instrument. You know, you can buy a guitar for like $50, $100 or something. So yeah, they're making, but not easy to sell.
Yeah.
If anybody wants one, please drop me a message. They go overseas.
Yes, you know, I think Alena also has a YouTube channel, right? For us to subscribe to, or you know,
So I spent lockdown hacking YouTube, like trying to figure the ins and outs of YouTube. It's like learning a whole new platform, and so I'm being very diligent in creating content, and I'm coming out with a new single and music video next week in Collaborate language. So yeah, please subscribe.
Wonderful. I would like to ask, okay, I think this is also relevant to Mr. Tui because the reason why I asked, you know, the other day when we were having our pre-briefing, you did show us a little bit of your puppets which are left untouched at this moment. I'm also asking about, you know, the artisan, like the people who actually create those puppets. Do you actually create those puppets yourself, sir?
No, because I am just the founder and director of the puppet group. So here in Myanmar, there are not so many families left in puppetry. So I think here in Yangon, only about 5 families in puppetry doing traditional. And 2 or 5, they are puppet makers. So they make their puppet. And our puppets are not small size, about 28 inches, 70 centimeter, and heavy about 3 to 4 kilograms. And the Myanmar traditional puppet show is not doing by just one man or one woman. We are doing by group, minimum 4 or 5 people, and the whole group, the musicians, the storytellers, about 20 artists. And the performance is overnight. So that is why I am unable to stream online as because we need big group to perform a traditional puppet show.
And I wonder whether you have, you know, you have a puppet nearby to show us how it looks like.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, if you, yes.
Well, here you can see how the puppet is big.
Yes.
See?
And you keep it in a glass cabinet?
No, they are just hanging on stand.
Okay.
Yeah. So normally I cover with plastic or fabric to avoid dust. But today I want to show you.
And you know, back to the issue about, you know, families that are creating these puppets. Do you know how they are coping, or are they also changing careers because of this COVID environment?
Yeah, I did nothing because in Myanmar, I told you, the puppet show are doing in the pagoda or temple festival at night. In the full moon, about 4 or 5 days. So after 1988, there are very few puppet show in the pagoda festival. Maybe 2 or 3 times in a year only. So that is why before 1988, there are more than 100 families who are working in traditional puppetry, traveling around Myanmar and doing the puppet show in the Pagoda Festival. But after 1988, puppet shows are declined and 2 or 3 puppet shows in a year. That is why now just 4 or 5 families, they are doing traditional puppetry. And some of them, they are producing puppets, not for the performance, for the tourism. You know, there are souvenir, small marionette, especially in Bagan and in Mandalay. So they make very small size puppet, not for the performance, and send to Bagan, Mandalay, the main tourist sites of Myanmar. So something like this. So now tourism is totally stopped. They are not doing anymore.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Tui, for that. I'd just like to, tell those who are also present here, if you have any questions, so feel free to populate the chat with those questions. I have, a question to ask. Oh, okay. So I have a question here from Pam. Okay, later I will do that. So maybe a question I would like to ask to my fellow panelists here is, there is aspirations for us to wait for, a post-COVID environment. And I really wonder how that would look like. And I'm just wondering, how do you feel it's best for traditional artists to move forward? Um, you know, Looking at the types of losses that we are losses, and sometimes we can consider some gains as well in this period. So what are your takes on your perspective on moving forward, dealing with all these circumstances? Would anyone want to
It's a scary question.
It is. I know. Yeah.
How it's gonna be.
I don't know. Okay. Probably what I can do now probably is, Pam Ho has asked in the chat whether I can share a little bit, because I'm also very involved in the traditional art scene.
Yeah.
Well, the Singapore perspective, I would say that a lot of times the focus is on arts in general. And I've been also questioning a lot about whether there has been efforts to address the issues that traditional artists are going through. Similar to some of the conversations that we've had so far, the traditional art sometimes, for lack of a better way of saying it takes a village to perform. Or sometimes it needs more than just an artist to create that experience that we want to create. And also, so hence we are quite interdependent on one another. And sometimes the forgotten casualties are not so much the artists, it's also the artisans who are involved in the creation of the costume, the creation of the props, because they are not in the forefront of presenting themselves. So I'm also wondering how such funding that it's given from governments or agencies can also address such matters. I would say that we are relatively somewhat taken care of to some extent, and also because artists in Singapore, we are part of the gig economy at most parts, and as self-employed persons, we are also we can tap into different grants, but a lot of times, because traditional artists might not be like a lot of the veterans and the elders, they might not be conversant in English or in dealing with such bureaucratic forms, for example. So they might not participate, or they might not even tap into such resources. So now the question is, how can we also help in allowing them to understand that these are for them, but they just need to do the hard work of applying. So I've noticed that happening too amongst my veterans. Yeah. So that in a nutshell is also how I would say COVID has also affected the traditional arts. And also moving forward, my perspective is, personally, I it's true what Alena said. Such a tough question, because to we don't want to be too idealistic. Yes, we don't want to be too idealistic. But I think there is also opportunities that we can still tap on and see whether it has longevity and sustainability. Hence, traditional artists a lot in Singapore have been going online to share some of the works that they're doing. And also because funding has also been very focused on digital arts. And hence, a lot more digitalization is happening in the next few months. And we're going to see a lot of that in Singapore until December. Yeah, so do you guys have anything to comment with regards to what I've just shared?
I think it's interesting about the digital space, because in one hand it's creating opportunities for connection. On the other hand, it's also a real threat to the purity of certain practices, because when you have to subvert or abstract them for an online platform, you lose a lot of the spirit that is with them, that comes with that practice. I think one of the losses that we don't quite know yet, and Alena brought it up earlier about being able to travel, because we're here in Melbourne, where I am, we're in our second phase of lockdown because we've just had a spike in coronavirus. So I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I'm supposed to be on the other side of Australia, but I can't go, much like Alena, to do some documenting and recording of elders. So that is one real thing that we can't really tell yet, the losses of what that knowledge is going to be at the end of this. The other big threat is that because we have a conservative government here, much like the UK, who are all talking about, austerity measures, austerity, everything's being cut. After this, what we're looking at is a smaller pot of funding for the arts. Therefore, the traditional arts get placed even lower on the rung. But this has all been the case in Australia pre-coronavirus. The problems that we're talking about now have already been problems that have existed for, many decades and generations. So it's interesting that on the one hand we have these grassroots collectives that are looking at, providing support and help for each other, because what we're finding already is that funding and government structures and bureaucracy have not been helpful. Why would we expect them to suddenly have an epiphany because we've faced a virus together?
Yes, that's very good points there. Sharing about how governments are also managing, or at least their treatment towards the arts. Usually, in a lot of cases, when nation states are affected, the arts will always be the first to receive cuts, and not seen as viable means to assist in development, especially in this period. Thank you, Jacob, for that. Mr. Htwe or Alena, do you have anything to add to what Jacob has just shared? If not, it's okay, because I think I also like to, highlight some of the comments that we're receiving, and I think it's also Alena's view that they are also sharing. Like for example, Chris and Irene Chico has also shared about, about traditional arts being done live, and how important that is, because if it's not done so, somewhat they lose agency because of how it's being depicted or being screened on live, and hence it also loses its excitement. So maybe Alena or Mr. Htwe, do you have anything to comment on that about live performance?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think when I said that the way we're playing online and going digital is just a matter of evolving, but what choice do we have? We can't do live shows, and we don't know when is the next time we can do live shows, so we have to adapt and evolve. But yeah, I really miss a live audience. and really can't wait to have one. But what can we do? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Tui, I think you have done so much in trying to create that audience, and now you have lost such audience. Do you miss having a live audience yourself?
Yes, I also missing my audience because Myanmar puppetry is depend on very based on music. You know, a traditional orchestra playing by 6 to 7 musicians, very loud and very hard beating, and also storytelling style. So Myanmar traditional puppetry is, let's say, 3-in-1 arts, not only manipulating the puppets, but also background, traditional music and storytelling is very hard beating. So this is not watching online. You should watch live performance. This is the best. So I hope to perform live audience with full orchestra.
I'm also thinking a lot too about future generations. Especially the direct generations that should be. This art form is being transmitted to. And how live performance itself is also part of that experience in learning the traditional art. Now, Nabila Said has also provided us with a very interesting question here. What does the panel think about this loaded term of casualty? Is the pandemic showing something really new, or is it merely making more clear how people or governments treat traditional arts, even pre-COVID? Anybody wants to respond to that? Maybe I think if I can offer something from what I've heard, I think Mr. Tui has provided us that historical insight to Myanmar as a young nation, as in a young democratic nation, and it's very evident as well that government policies were and how their treatment towards the arts were already present before COVID. And now, because COVID has happened, he has also, I think Mr. Tu has also shared that there's not been any government funding or government support at all, even in this very difficult circumstance. So, just to provide some, context. Yeah, Mr. Tu, you want to add to that, or maybe Jacob has something to say?
Mr. Twig.
Not me.
No, okay, okay. So maybe Jacob.
I think one of the things that that really does show, and like I was saying before, that what COVID has presented for us is put a spotlight on existing problems. Like we are a colonised nation here in Australia. We were colonised by the British 230 years ago. We still do not have treaty. We still do not have an agreement with our government about native title. But what we do have is a history of traditional arts being monetised and corporatised. And this dates back to the mid-1850s, the mid-1800s, where you had entrepreneurs who went about kidnapping traditional dancers from different areas and creating dance groups and essentially touring them up and down the east coast of Australia. This also led to human zoos that were taken to New York, that were taken to France, that were taken to London. So what it ended up doing from the mid-1800s is turning traditional arts into a commodity. So that's the practice that we have all inherited since then, that you can't practice your traditional arts unless it's a tourism venture, unless it's monetized. And what that kind of does is lay this problem that culture then cannot be transferred unless it is being supported through the monetary transactions. And that's, I think, the bigger problem that we need to face, is because not only have we been inherited this, but we've also inherited a hell of a lot of well, discrimination from these colonial governments, where it's been set up that tradition cannot be practiced on certain lands because you have to have permits, because it's been sold to mining companies, because, you know, someone else owns your water. You know, environmental groups say it's not, you cannot hunt certain animals, therefore you can't grab the skins that you need to make the drums that have to be made that go with the dance. Like, there's all this bureaucratic nonsense that's been put around, that's almost been put up as a barrier to practicing traditional arts, unless, of course, it's the nice, safe tourist version.
Yes, I think we're seeing that a lot too. If you know, from my experience in Sarawak at the Sarawak Cultural Village. But Alena, do you have anything to comment on that or not? It's fine. It's okay. I was just throwing, you know, my experience there, seeing a lot of this very friendly touristic versions.
Yeah. I don't know. This is leaving me a lot to think about later tonight, because I haven't really thought or reflected on these things, which I probably should. I think the word casualty is very loaded and very dramatic, but in a way, you know, maybe it's necessary for us to use such big words to yeah.
Okay, Mr. Tui, do you have anything to add to that? No? Okay. So maybe I think another question that's coming from Cathy is also quite interesting to ponder about, because a lot of our traditional forms would have some degree, you know, spiritual elements, because I'm also thinking about, you know, Aboriginal performances that I've seen in Australia, and how, and Cathy's question here is, you know, what do audience and communities lose when we no longer are able to watch and participate in traditional forms, especially since some of these forms are rooted in spiritual practices that may not work online? Mr. Twee, do you have anything to share with you know, the probably spiritual elements that may come with the performance of puppets?
Yes, we have invitation from Thailand, the Harmony Puppet Festival, which held here. But this year they can do performance, so they invited us to do the performance online. To send how we do puppet show with communities in the COVID periods. So now we are preparing to make a video of the puppet show to send to Thailand to show in the Harmony Puppet Festival. So this is our first online production to show on internet.
So you have also agreed eventually somewhat to have some online presence.
Yeah.
And how do you think, like, have you done the recording?
Not yet.
But do you think, you know, do you think there's some elements that might be lost because of the recording? As in, I understand you've shared that, you know, what is best is for a live performance where you see everything. But with perspective on spiritual elements, is there spiritual elements in puppet performance?
Now I am thinking how to make video short to include everything.
Okay. Jacob or Alena, any comments? Well, I look at the questions here.
Yeah. I was just looking at the questions from Irene and Sharifa about compromises. I think that might have been in relation to what I was saying. And all I could keep thinking was, like, especially with the Wild Dog project that I'm doing now, this is one example. When you look at, because elders had come to me and said, okay, what we need to do is we need to walk country. We need to take the children. We need to walk that country, walk that songline to teach that songline to a new generation. So what, in terms of capitalist and colonial systems, what problems that puts up for us in general is because Australia is such a large continent. If we were to take a group of elders and youth and a new generation of people belonging to that and walking that country, that could take us anything up to 3 to 4 months. Now, when that trip finishes, there's 3 and 4 months of rent, of bills, of all kinds of things that need to be paid, because we all have to go back to our homes, and those homes need to be paid for, that electricity needs to be paid for, so does the water. So therefore, that's what the current system has presented us. In order to do tradition the way tradition is supposed to be, you know, the way we're supposed to, where we do go on long journeys, where some ceremonies that we do have last up for 2 months. But in this current system, in the last 230 years, and all of these kind of capitalist, colonial and neoliberal systems that we've all adopted, therefore, that's generally, that's the block, that's the hurdle.
Yes, I think, you know, to probably balance this sense of anxiety that we might be facing, I would like to share, you know, a comment given by a colleague of mine, Kamini Ramachandran. So she says here, "Hi everyone, this is Kamini from Storyfest Singapore. We had to suddenly pivot the entire festival online last minute to the digital medium due to COVID-19. Instead of cancelling the entire festival, we decided to take the components that could translate to video as online storytelling." And you know, she said about it being launched at YouTube this Friday. So look out for that. I think Cathy has also shared a link there. And there has been quite positive responses. And now people are more able to engage with folk tales, myths, and fairy tales. And of course, she also admits that nothing can replace the intimacy and intensity of a physical storytelling session. But in the interim, we are able to continue to engage with our audiences. Here we also hear her saying oral tradition is one of the oldest arts forms, and in its simplest form, it is able to somewhat translate to the digital medium and maintain most of its essence. As long as we have a story, a storyteller, and one listener, we are able to share our traditional stories. I think, you know, in conjunction with what she's also said, I think, you know, my fellow colleagues here too have shared a lot about, you know, going online to share, and also engaging with more youth practitioners as well. I would just like to highlight a question. I think this is, it sounds like, you know, she's a student who's also learning more about the traditional arts. She has asked if being in the arts industry, you know, is there a bright future, especially for performers? Parents have an impression that arts in general does not have a career advancement, especially since in the arts you tend to be self-employed as well. And this COVID situation shows how there aren't many opportunities because we rely on audience. Does anybody wants to comment or to give some advice to, I think, this young lady with regards to career advancements in this period?
Well, I think many jobs don't really have advancements in this period. It's just a tough time for jobs. I think, you know, in the arts you can progress and advance. And, you know, if that's where your heart is and your talent is, then you should go for it, but go all in.
I think, you know, this environment has taught us as well a lot about resilience, and also it's taught us a lot about, you know, I think, you know, if there is any intention at all to be an artist, you know, this is something that we will be faced with. I think, you know, even pre-COVID, as much as it has been very detrimental to a lot of artists, it's also clear that even before COVID, such stigma or anxieties have already been present. So I think, you know, I think we I don't necessarily like to paint a very beautiful picture when we talk about life as an artist. I mean, it gives us some satisfaction to some extent, but also, you know, we also must take this on board that, you know, the journey in life that comes and the rejections that we might face. So I think all the more COVID should make us even more resilient. And I think seeing from the three of you here today, sharing a lot about your experiences in dealing with non-funding or, you know, even minimal funding, there is still to some extent a desire to practice. If I can now highlight Nabila Said's question, Is there maybe a need to do away with the categories of traditional versus non-traditional art? Is there a respect for the sacred and historic within modern arts administrations beyond a performative or cursory respect? I think she's also highlighting here about I think a lot of times when we talk about performing arts, we're also talking about the theater, and the theater itself is very much a Western, concept or a Western construct. I think she's also talking about environments wherein the art form itself doesn't it's not really practiced within a theater setting. So like what we've heard from Alena as well about the circle community, circle dancing, and from Jacob from with regards to elders. Maybe you have something to share or to comment on Nabila's question.
What's the cursory respect?
Maybe if Nabila can share a little bit about her thoughts about what she means by cursory respect. Is there respect for the sacred and the historic within modern art administrations beyond performative?
I think there is a lot of similarities between traditional and non-traditional arts. Like I said, sometimes I think, why isn't the piano considered traditional, or like guitars and that kind of stuff? I think, as a traditional artist or musician, maybe our process is a little bit different from non-traditional arts, and maybe we need more support in that process bit. But you do see now contemporary, I mean not now, but we have seen contemporary arts that are site specific, not on a stage, not in a theater, by a waterfall or in the bus or something like that. So I think there is a lot of there is something to say for doing away with the categories of traditional versus non-traditional, but maybe looking more at the needs, such as like documentation, research, and I guess the different processes involved, maybe, or maybe reframing what you think is traditional and non-traditional.
I think we've had problems with that in Australia too, and it's purely, I think, really over the kind of categories that traditional arts always get put into, whether it be hobbyist, whether it be folk, whether it be heritage arts, which then is often seen as community practice and not worthy of investment, particularly financial investment. However, like coming from Australia, coming from a culture who is considered, we're one of the world's oldest living continuous culture in the world. We have carbon dating that suggests that we've been here for 80,000 years on this continent. And there's new carbon dating that is suggesting that we have had occupation of the continent of Australia for 120,000 years, which kind of blows that whole out of Africa notion out of the water. So for us, traditional arts is a way of communicating with each other, but also it's a way, these songs and these stories are the way in which we find out who we are and how we belong to a certain place. It tells you about the landscape. It tells you how to navigate that environment, how to sustain yourself and your community. So I think when we look at traditional versus non-traditional arts, I would ask of non-traditional arts and contemporary arts to then ask a question: what is your function?
Thank you for that, Jacob. Mr. Htwe, I'm actually quite curious also, when you did say that, puppetry arts is facing, not many audiences or at least only support, no support from the government. I wonder, whether the traditional arts what is puppetry being faced with? As in, are there more contemporary art forms that are coming in Myanmar that is affecting audienceship also?
I think so, because we have collaboration with Alliance Française, Cathy, and also Goethe Institute. the German Culture Center. So they contacted puppet making, storytelling. So my son and my daughter, they participated. And also we have collaboration in Thailand, Cambodia as well. Also collaboration with ASEAN Puppetry Association. So now we are trying to step from puppetry to the modern puppetry or contemporary storytelling. So I think the audience is looking for news, change. So we have to show them. The puppetry in tradition is just, so in Myanmar puppetry, so puppet shows are not only for entertaining. They are like medias in old days. There was no television, no newspaper. So puppeteers are telling story. Not only telling story, they are conveying message between the government and public in the puppet show as well. So we like to do, like in Malaysia, we met the Paper Monkey, the puppet group. Now they are making contemporary puppetry and the politic storytelling. So in Myanmar as well, we like to do, but at the moment, we are not allowed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tui, for that. I think we have shared a diverse set of expectations, questions, and problems in this wonderful panel. Probably before I wrap up, could I just invite all of you to share a little bit, or lastly probably, about what is your hope as a practitioner of the form moving forward. I know this is difficult, but I think let's end with feeling that all our efforts, even in this COVID circumstance, will be something that is going to help, even if it's not us, the audienceship that we have created, even in this period. So maybe if I could ask probably Alena, if you have, if you want to share any words of hope.
Oh, I have so many. I don't know where to start. But I think with respect to traditional arts, I just hope that we will find a way to. I think number one, like I said, the most urgent thing is the research and documentation part. So I don't know what it is. Maybe if there's better connectivity suddenly in the rural areas, that we can connect to the elders over there, or if we can somehow start training the young people to use recording facilities that we don't have yet, maybe this will be something to push us that way. And I also hope people will take this time to learn as well. So I've started giving Sapet lessons, and I think it's a good time to take lessons, especially when performers are not busy performing. So I'm encouraging people to take lessons, not just from me, but wherever they are, to also sit with their. This is something else I've done. I've encouraged people to sit with their elders, with their parents, whoever is around them, and just to draw stories from them.
Thank you so much, Alena, for that. Mr. Tui, maybe you have words of hope and wisdom to share before we wrap up.
Yeah. So as I said before, I like to show live performance, but this is a challenge for the audience. So I have to try to change performance online, how to show them.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tui. And for Jacob, any words of hope?
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with what Alena has said about learning and documentation of elders and knowledge. I think looking in some of the comments, there's a couple of words that have popped up, one being sacred and one being sharing. I think in terms of moving forward, it would be great, like in this great pause that we now have, if we as communities around the world, as societies, not just arts communities, can relook at what the function of us gathering and arts practice is, because I think if we look at ourselves as contemporary arts practitioners, this has all come from a traditional practice. Over thousands and thousands of years, this contemporary arts movement has evolved into what we are expressing right now. It would be great if in this time we could look behind us and maybe return back to the sacred and back to the sharing. And I think that's what a lot of people are wanting. They're needing connection right now.
Thank you for that. I think, I just realized something, that if we were to consider history, the four of us come from nations which have been colonized by the British. Okay.
Yay.
So I'm sorry. Okay, that was just to lighten up lighten up spirits, and also to also, I would like to say sorry, I don't know why I would like to say that I'm very touched by the stories that the three of you have shared with me today. And I think it also speaks a lot about resilience, and also talking a lot about, returning back to the sacred, or returning back to the function of why we create communities in the first place. And I thank all of you for this. And I hope, and as well, to the audience that we have been sharing our stories to today, I think they have been an audience that's very engaged and committed. Thank you so much for the questions that have come, and also comments that have also shared, stories of hope, stories of how artists are also finding new ways in interacting with audiences online. So with that, I would like to say thank you, and I would like to pass this time now to Nabila. I've written here quite big. Please return it to Nabila. Yes.
Thank you, Amin. Thank you to the speakers and moderators. I just have some closing remarks while everyone is still here. Hang on, I'm just sharing my screen. So for the audience who's here, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this space today with us. I was mentioning that this is the second of this Burning Question series, and our third one is happening just next week. So we hope that you will be able to join us. And for that one, the topic or the burning question is there hope for integrity and intimacy in online performance? And I think that'll be a very interesting topic as well, a very different one from today's, but a very interesting one as well. And our panelists are Bernice Lee, who's an artist from Singapore, Katrina Stewart Santiago, who's a cultural critic from Manila, and there's Maria Sulistiani, who's from Paper Moon Puppet in Jogja, Indonesia, and the moderator is Corey Tan for that one. So we hope you can join us next week as well, so you can sign up for that talk on PTIX. And just one last thing before I go is ArtsEquator is also doing reviewing courses. If anyone is interested, we're doing dance and theatre and books reviewing, so that's kind of interesting. For the dance course, the registration actually closes on the 27th of July. So if anyone is interested, please do look at our website and our social media pages for that information. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and we wish you a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.